Truemeds has done something unconventional. They have created a playbook where they have scaled their email return on ad spend from 2x to 40x.
Being closer to the customer, right? Because any profitable business in India are not being made by performance marketing, but being made by retention.
Sure.
Right? We have been able to reduce it significantly, upwards of 50-60%. If anything going in spam, it's money going into the drain.
Welcome to For the Love of Emails, a show we created few years ago, believing emails matter. It still does. In fact, more than ever. Email has evolved from being static messages to interactive storefront. For few brands, email is hygiene. For few, it's a growth engine. The brands that get it right, they're winning the game. The conversation also has to evolve. There are so many brands who are leaving money on the table with email. It's not they don't care about it. Maybe no one has shown them what's possible with it. Hi, I'm Tanishq Juneja, Chief Email Evangelist at Netcore. And if you are ready to unlock what's possible with email, this is your show. In today's episode, we talk to Truemeds. Truemeds is India's #1 e-pharma D2C in affordable healthcare category. Truemeds has done something unconventional. They have created a playbook where they have scaled their email return on ad spend from 2x to 40x. And the man behind that playbook is Sourav Patwari. Sourav, welcome.
Thank you, Tanishq. Thank you for having me here. Looking forward to exciting conversation about a channel which is always taken for granted by the marketeers or the growth marketeers.
True that. So Sourav, before we go deep dive into the conversation, we all would love to know who Sourav is and what exactly you do at Truemeds.
I come from a very humble background from a city like Dhanbad from Jharkhand, and I started my journey way back in 2011, 2012 with a startup called Socrates, and always excited about 0 to 1 journeys, always get excited about startups from that time, and online was just kicking in India at scale at that point of time. So been very fortunate to work with almost hundreds of brands in my journey with Merkle for 6.5, 7 years. And post that, again, this 0 to 1 plugged in, and I started my own bootstrap startup in e-waste management based out of Pune, and ran it for a couple of years, and then again it didn't work out in terms of the unit maths and all, and then moved to brand side to look at the entire journey from the other side of the table, because once you are at agency side, you have a different perspective, different exposure, and then when you move to the brand side, you see the entire brand building happening. That's when got a journey, got to learn about storytelling, creating top of the funnels at Z5 and at Amazon Prime. And post that, again, Truemeds happened. Again, starting from 0 to 1, very challenging, very exciting space.
I think you love 0 to 1.
Yeah, that is what I can talk about. Always excited to build something from scratch. And Truemeds gave me that opportunity, and now I'm here heading the entire growth and marketing charter at Truemeds.
Amazing, Sourav. So, Sourav, we are here to obviously talk about the growth system that you created. But before we go there, when you started early on in your career, what email looked like? And today when you look at email, because there's decades of experience added to it, decades of evolution added to it, what it looks like. So what is the contrast?
To be very honest, at that point of time, email was seen as a very professional setup, and it's not been very exhaustively and used by the marketeers and growth marketeers that it can become a channel to create sort of an engagement and sort of an interaction with the customers, right? And it was very text heavy, if I talk about, right? But from there to today, I can see it has evolved a lot in terms of the kind of dynamism it has got into the ecosystem, the kind of interactions which are possible now with the formats which email has. You can run a lot of quizzes, you can run a lot of interactive emailers, and it's full of creativity now, right? It's not just plain text vanilla email. So that kind of evolved, and on top of that, the second piece which I want to talk about is at that point of time, you didn't have those kind of targeting capabilities around it, right? And with the evolution of growth marketing or the ad tech ecosystem, that has also been adopted by emails in terms of the kind of segmentation, the kind of targetings you can do. Is the
So
kind
email
of
gives you more control now.
yes, I can talk about that, right? You can be more targeted, you can be more personalized in your communications is what I can talk about.
Amazing. So I see that the evolution definitely has happened. Like I said in the beginning also, a lot of brands treat email as their extended storefront, right? You could go and just shop. You don't have to go out anywhere. So there's an exciting and interesting evolution that has happened. So tell me one thing. When we talk about Truemeds, what it is really built for? What is the vision? What problem are you trying to solve?
So Truemeds is an e-pharmacy and telehealthcare platform, primarily working with a vision of making healthcare affordable in India. And when it comes to chronic patients, generally, if you look at any person suffering from diabetes or hypertension, the average cart size on a monthly basis varies between 2,500 rupees to 5,000 rupees, depending upon the conditions they are into. So now Truemeds is trying to cut this cost by almost 50%, right, on an average. So that's the kind of affordability we are trying to drive. Now, how we are able to do it is very interesting, right? Because for any medicines to work, the core element is their salt composition, which helps you treat, and not the brand name, right? And the medicines in India, which are selling almost 70 to 80% of medicines are off-patented. Now, when I say off-patented, it means that all the R&D cost, all the marketing and sales cost which got involved is now that that is over, and that formula is available to rest of the e-pharmacies.
So is it open source formula now?
Yes, right. So now nobody has to do the R&D again. Nobody has to do testing again. Nobody has to put the ground staff to sell it that this is something which solves for this. So you just have to manufacture it. So that's where the cost comes down by almost 50%, right? So the concept is largely revolves around branded generics and traded generics. So
Just branded generics and traded generics, what exactly they are?
So branded generics are primarily which comes from the top pharma companies who spent a lot of money in R&Ds and brand building, etc., etc. Though they sold by the big brand names. While traded generic is something which doesn't carry such big brand names, etc., etc., but since the formula is available to them, it's being sold throughout pharmacies, e-pharmacies, hospitals, etc., etc., or government, right? And now what Truemeds is trying to do is that for every medicines which is prescribed by your doctor, for every branded medicines, there is a branded substitute alternative we recommend on our platform, which again still comes from the top 1% pharma companies in India, which ensures that the quality is top notch, the efficacy is top notch, and the effect of the medicines is the same, right? So that solves for primarily the that if something is coming at a lower cost, it's not compromised. Sure. It's just a smarter choice.
That's very instinctive, right?
Yes.
50% less, is the medicine effective or not?
Yes, because that's how the first thing comes. How can something which is so expensive coming at a 50% lower cost? But the idea is that since it's off patent, all the cost sectors have been removed, and now it can be manufactured at a much lower cost. And Truemeds is making this accessible to the end consumer, giving them a choice, educating them and empowering them to make a choice that, okay, you have a fair, exactly same options, exact same effect, but at a 50% lower cost. So this reduced the entire monthly cart size, which I was explaining about, from 5,000 rupees to 2,500 rupees. Sure. So that's the change we are trying to drive in the Indian ecosystem.
Interesting. Now this sounds very noble, first of all. So congratulations on trying something which is such an audacious vision at such a scale, right? We're talking about 1.4, 1.5 billion population you're trying to solve this for. So when I look at Truemeds and what you're trying to do, I'm sure you would face probably trust crisis. A lot of the users that come onto platform, right? You were talking about substitute, branded medicine, etc. So when these people come to your platform, they're not one-time user. What does trust stand or play a role in the way you market to them?
No, so trust in healthcare, which is a very serious business, right? This is a category which is called as YMYL category, which is your money, your life. So you have to be, trust plays a very important role in this category. And the thing which we are trying to change the category in itself, because if you look at the Indian ecosystem, how does a consumer or a patient go for buying a medicine? There is a doctor and there is a nearby pharmacist which is well connected, and doctor writes the particular medicines and you go to the next pharmacy for that particular medicine bill, for particular medicines, particular prescription. But what we are trying to say, and then nobody questions the doctor, sir, why have you written this particular medicine? Why this particular brand? Because doctor is a godlike figure in India, right? And you just get very small airtime to have your conversations. But when it comes to rest of the things, rest of the consumables, be it juices, be it atta, you have multiple brands together. You have choices. In atta, you go with Annapurna or a Shakti Bhog or
Yeah, so medicine is all
prescription, right? So we are enabling the consumers that there is a choice to be made on medicine as well, right? Because it's not the brand name which treats you, it's the salt composition which treats you, right? But the Indians, this entire ecosystem works very differently, right? So we are firstly trying to create a category, trying to educate customers that something like this exists, and then making it accessible as well on platform so that they can have it, right? So for all the prescribed medications, we have one or two substitutes at our backend, and we recommend them the best possible substitute out of our proprietary algorithm. So that's how that functions.
This is great. So, but if I look at, are there instances where customers have come down and said, no, I don't want to buy the substitute medicine?
Yes, because like I said, so doctor is somebody who is recommending, who is educated enough, who has a degree to recommend those medicines. So why would somebody trust a brand like Truemeds, right? And we end up getting these conversations because it's something new, and we are trying to drive a change. So we have leveraged doctors only because they are experts. So what happens is that whenever somebody submits an order on our platform, there is a mandatory doctor calls, right? Doctor call which happens where doctor creates the prescription, because in India, a lot of people doesn't have their digital prescriptions handy. While creating those prescriptions, they educate the customers about that, okay, you are taking this so-and-so medicines, and we have an affordable alternative from a particular brand. So let's say if I have to give you an example, there is a calcium and vitamin supplement called as Shellcal, which comes from Torrents, and Truemeds recommend Sipcal, right? So Shellcal comes from Torrents and Sipcal comes from Cipla. Now again, both are known brands. Shellcal is priced at 120 rupees a strip, and while Sipcal is priced at 50 rupees a strip.
Oh.
So that's the kind of delta.
Almost 60%.
Yes, almost 60%, and that's the kind of delta it adds. So when a doctor educates them, it's kind of empower. And what we have learned is that people who are chronic in nature, they have done R&D on their medicines. They know their salt compositions. They know where this medicine comes at what price, offline mein kya price hai, online mein kya price hai, because they have to take these medicines every day and don't know till how long.
So the trust crisis is solved with doctors calling,
yes,
and talking and explaining about salt, irrespective whether you know or not.
Yes, absolutely. And we do this it just doesn't stop at doctor call, right? On the platform also, we give fair comparison of the medicines, try to showcase them the brand which it is coming up from, right? And the biggest part which Truemeds tried solving for is that we are sourcing our medicines only from top 1% pharma companies in India, right? So that adds a lot of credibility about the quality of the medicines, about the efficacy of the medicines, and which kinds of empower the end user to take that call. And we try to keep it very easy for the end consumer, right? In terms of if they go back and want to check with their doctors, we tell them these are the brand names, go back and check once they come back. And the very interesting part is that we don't force people to take those medicines. We educate them. Choice is still in their hands. Let's say if somebody comes and says, no, 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 I don't want to change my medicines. Give me exactly what my doctor has written. So we end up giving that to them, right? But we keep on educating them, and it's a cycle. When you are trying to drive a bigger change, it needs time. It needs consistent, you can say,
Education.
consistent educations, consistently you have to keep on explaining them what is the difference and drive this.
Keep reiterating.
Keep reiterating.
So they keep
that
believing,
thought.
yeah.
Yes.
Eventually they evolve.
Yes, yes. And with government interventions, it is acting as a enabler for us, because if you look at a very recent change which government tried doing is that to create this composition fees. So if you look at your medicine strip 2 years back, the brand name is written in a big font while the composition is written in very small fonts. Now, the recently government has changed that the composition has to be bold enough and the brand name has to be small.
Sure.
So that customers take informed choices, well aware about what is treating them.
So,
that
so
is
the whole
also,
ecosystem is helping your noble cause. Huh?
yes, yes, that's what you can say, right? So
amazing. So Sourav, if I zoom out and look at your experience and exposure, right? You have been part of big wallets like Amazon, Z5, where the marketing budgets were huge, I'm assuming, and then Truemeds, which is your 0 to 1 journey, as you said in the beginning. How do you look at growth? What is your growth philosophy when you look at the brands you have worked in and now at Truemeds?
So primarily with all the experiences in past, I have touched upon the various aspects of growth. Is earlier in my career, I was more focused towards down the funnel, which is more related to performance marketing, which we today called as, right? And then with my tenure at Amazon and Z5, I have learned more of a storytelling and the top of the funnel marketing, right? Now with Truemeds, it was a 0 to 1. So it's a combination of both is what we are trying to drive here, to build a brand which can be trusted, and we want to create a brand which is working towards the growth sustainably, right? So that is something which is very critical for us, and so we want to grow, which needs educations in the form of top of the funnel, and you have to also, we look at growth largely at Truemeds from the customer first standpoint, right? Because if you look at that, we are dealing with real people battling with their healthcare problems, which is a very serious affair for them, right? So we have to be empathetic, and we have to be solving their real problems in a much more affordable way, which we are trying to solve, right? So that's where...
so in the Amazon and Z5, it was slightly more casual users, but these
Yeah.
are quite sincere.
Yes, because e-commerce comes with a lot of impulse buying. You can talk a lot more in terms of you can be more creative and more experimental in your growth marketing approach. But with healthcare, where the real audience is somewhere sitting at a 40 plus, 45 plus, it becomes real storytelling, which are more relatable to them, and then pushing. So that's where we build the top of the funnel educations about substitution with channels like emails, which comes very handy because it gives you a lot of options in terms of building contextuality, building the kind of interactions on a continuous basis, and obviously it's...
So right now you have a frugal mindset, so
yes,
email becomes...
right, because you ended up spending a lot of amount in performance budgets and ads, etc., etc. But this is a continuous channel which can be leveraged and much more cost effective and highly engaged channel from the end consumer standpoint.
It's very exciting for me to go back to email, but right now I want to ask a separate question. Your role is expanding in Truemeds. You're doing a lot of things. What are you doing? What are the things specifically that you are looking at personally? And what are the things that you have tried automating or probably your team should be able to take care of? So are there automations that have been built? Are there systems that have been built? And where are the things that are still close to your heart, so you are looking at them personally?
No, very interesting, right? Because at every stage of your journey, you get different set of challenges and different set of problems, right? And as a growth marketer, you always keep juggling between the profitability, sustainability, and growth, put together and looking at the current ecosystem, and as per our founders thought process, we want to make a sustainable business, right?
Sure.
And if you look at marketing cost per se, it sits at a CM2 level, right, which is a cost center.
What is CM2?
It's a contribution margin 2, which considers all the variable cost. So if the business is pulling out that's all variable cost, then you have infinite budget to scale, right?
Sure.
That's how you can see that CM2 as, right? So there is a consistent battle to figure out newer growth avenues, newer growth channels, which are more affordable or sustainable in nature, right? Because you can do so much with ads, you can do so much with a lot of ad tech ecosystem, but storytelling has to go continuously, right?
Sure.
So the most important for a platform like us, where there are like 2.5, 3 lakhs medicines out there, and for each medicines we are recommending a substitute, so it becomes content plays a very important role, right? In terms of what these medicines are all about, having a plus content we called as in our ecosystem, creating a plus content, so many medicines at scale is the key, right? So fundamentally at every stage we try to build the infrastructure first, right? Let's say if I talk about the content, right? So we know that a particular salt can be a composition for so many medicines.
Sure.
So if you create the base content, then you can amplify it and scale it to thousands of medicines at a time.
And how many medicines are listed?
So on Truemeds, if I talk about RX medicines, they are close to 2.5 to 3 lakhs, and on top of there is somewhere close to 50,000 to 1 lakh OTCs, right? So that's the kind of.
What is RX?
RX is prescribed medicines,
Okay.
and OTCs are over-the-counter supplements.
You don't need prescriptions
for that. Yeah. So that's
and you
how
have
it
to
works.
generate content for each of them.
Yes. So we always think of fundamentals first, and then how can we automate it to scale.
Sure.
So that is something where a lot of my time goes into setting up the fundamentals and thinking about how can we scale it, because otherwise, if
That's a very platform thinking,
Yeah.
which is very good.
yeah, and apart from that, a lot of time goes into being closer to the customer, right? Because any profitable business in India are not being made by performance marketing, but being made by retention.
Sure.
Right? So you have to be very closer to the customer conversations. You have to be very much aware about what are their pain points at every step, because it's a journey, right? From buying the medicines, that medicine reaching to their doorstep, and then they are having the same effectiveness, right? And then the repeat cycle, because as we are catering the category which is chronic in nature, it automatically becomes a repeat business, because every month you should have so that's where the experience plays a very important role. So that is where a lot of my time goes into to stitch that entire journey and solve for that, is what I can tell.
No, I love that you're solving for platform, you're solving for scale. And 300,000 medicines, it means like 300,000 stories that you are sharing.
Yeah, yeah,
Lovely. So most D2C brands today, they want growth at any cost.
yeah.
And then there is a mindset of sustainable growth. What I understand, you have done both. Now looking at Truemeds, what does your growth philosophy looks like? What was your early growth at Truemeds, and what does that growth look like today?
No, so obviously, like I told that we as a brand believe in sustainable growth, not growth at any cost, right? So if you look at growth sustainably, that something comes very fundamentally with us, right? Because our founders believe that throwing money at every problem is not solve the problems, right? But rather than thinking fundamentally and then building solutions around it works, right? So if you look at the early stage of Truemeds, when I joined, we were quite heavy on the marketing spends to acquire new customers via performance marketing channels. But over a period of time, over the past 2.5 years, we have been able to reduce it significantly, upwards of 50-60%, while keeping the growth intact, right? So that's a shift fundamentally drives, because again, like I told earlier, that marketing is the biggest cost center to run any kind of a online D2C brand or brand which is accessible to masses, right? So, and this shift largely plays because we consistently keep on thinking that what are the other growth avenues which are more sustainable and more economical in nature, and that's where channel like emails, organic and CRM channels comes very handy because they act as a hero because they are very much cost effective, and you have to always make a life cycle journey for the end consumer, right? Because you have acquired from the performance marketing, but you don't want to again spend and go after that customers by putting some extra money. So these channels enables you with effective storytelling at a consistent intervals at a much lower cost, right? So and then the ROI is,
And then you are able to build sustainable growth levers or systems.
absolutely right. But fundamentally, you have to think very fundamentally because a lot of people, a lot of marketers takes these channels for granted. But it requires a lot of infrastructure, fundamental approach of storytelling to drive success out of these channels.
Sure. So, since you touched upon CRM-led growth and email, I want to now touch upon email. For most brands, email is hygiene. And I think, obviously, because it's so hygienic or so regular that sometimes it is taken for granted. What did email look like at Truemeds in early days? You know, when you joined in, I think during that time, what did CRM-led growth or what did email look like?
To be very honest, it's kind of a non-existent, right? Because we hardly collect emails fundamentally on a user level at the very early, right? Because you try to keep when in terms of controlling the user experiences, you try to keep the user journey very simple. You don't want to ask so many details about the customers, right? You simply go ahead with mobile number and address, and that is what you used to stick at, right? But once we started thinking towards creating or leveraging email as a channel, this becomes the fundamental requirement, right? Because if you don't have email IDs in itself, what will you build upon, right? Sure. So the very first step was to start collecting those email addresses at scale. So if I have to give you the quantum, we were hardly sitting at 100,000 odd email IDs in the beginning when we started.
And what was that percentage of the total users you all had?
It would be less than 1 to 2%. Less than 2%, I would say. It would be less than 2%
Sure.
at that point of time, right?
Sure.
But from there, we did a lot of interventions in the consumer journey to start collecting those email IDs and build up this. So, and today we are sitting at upwards of 2 million odd email IDs in our system. So that is one piece to solve for this email as a channel, and that's how it has shifted. Beyond that,
but with that 100,000 or whatever there was, were you using it to share stories, and what was it like?
Yeah, it was. So that's the second part of the story, right? Because once you have the email IDs, but now you have to create a infrastructure, and which is a very robust infrastructure, I would say, because while email sounds very simple, but it's also very technical, right? Because you are dealing with real people in the end, right? So you can't spam too much, right? You can't be spammy and you can't overdo on things, right? So the entire experience, the email experience was also broken at that point of time. The entire umbrella strategy to drive the life cycle and drive the education aspect of substitution to the consumers was missing. So we created that entire umbrella strategy. We built that infrastructure in terms of keeping a very healthy domain health for emailers so that your emails land on a primary inbox rather than on promotion or spam, right? So these are the things we tried solving fundamentally before scaling. So
Sure.
That's how we...
So let me go back to the pain area. So you said the reach was low, the emails were not going to inbox sometimes, and you did not want to over spam or over send emails to these few users or few email IDs that you had, right? And then you started focusing on the growth. And lovely. This is amazing that there were some pain areas that you understood early on. Now, when I look at growth levers, or when I look at you scaled from, because of the sustainable mindset, you scaled from email not doing so good to becoming a great engagement channel, and then even scale to become a revenue system for you. Tell us more about that journey. We'll go deeper, slightly deeper here, and today a lot of brands want to understand how they can create email as a revenue system. So I want to really touch upon, whatever the growth levers are, whatever the pillars of this whole Sourav system or Sourav's framework is. We would like to uncover that.
Yeah, so interesting, right? So I would like to primarily categorize into 3-4 pillars sort of thing, how we navigated from storytelling to eventually closing the customers in terms of repeat purchases. Because like I told you, refill is a very strong use case for us because we are dealing with chronic patients in India who requires medicines at a particular frequency. So again, boils down to fundamentals, right? Creating the infrastructure first, having a very robust email collection system, and then robust categorization of the emailers, right? Because the prioritization and the cohortization of the consumers is really important, right? Because you need to understand who are the consumers who are active on email as a channel and who are engaging on email as a channel. Because
So you are struggling with low reach, right?
yes, we are struggling with lower reach, right?
How did that collection happen? If we can go slightly deeper, what did you do differently that you got more reach, more email IDs, more users subscribing to email IDs?
So fundamentally, it's all how you play with your user journey on the platform, right? What are the interventions and discovery you can create for collecting email IDs so that it doesn't sound very pushy, and you have to ask it very smoothly in your customer journey. Maybe somebody coming out at reading your blogs. There you quickly and spending good enough time, you simply nudge saying that we'll send you a regular newsletter about something going new in the healthcare, or you're in your own space. So those kind of things we keep on doing to collect the email IDs. And secondly, you talk about reach, right? So even after collecting the email IDs, the game is not, it's just 50% of the work done. But the remaining 50% is that you should land to the right people and you should not land on as a spam, right? Because while these are cost-effective channels, but if anything going in spam, it's money going into the drain, right? So, and it's just not about spam. It has to do a lot with domain reputation. So if a lot of your emailers goes into spam, so the system will mark your domain as a domain health as poor, and it will impact your entire journey of emailers, right? So we tried fixing for that, and to solve for that, we did a lot of cohortization and a lot of prioritization in terms of the cohorts, segmenting them with sort of engaged users, heavily engaged users to like a medium engaged users to a low engaged users kind of a thing.
So this is very interesting. I want to again like to add it up. You started collecting more and more emails, which happened because you started promising value to your customers and they started giving you email addresses. The reach problem, the expansion problem solved because users were there. So from 100,000, it scaled to how many?
Upwards of like between 2 million to 3 million, kind of a number
So
which
there's
I can talk about.
10 to 20% or 10 to 20x
Yes.
growth that happened. And then you started solving for reaching in the right place in inbox, right? So email could land in either spam or they could land in inbox. Could be promotions, could be also primary.
Yeah.
But you started solving that through prioritizing cohorts which are more engaged.
Yes, and it's just one aspect of it, right? Because one is prioritization, right? But that again solves, like I was saying, that again solves for 50%. But the relevance of the content also play a very important role, right? How curated you are with respect to those set of cohorts, right? How relevant, how personalized you are to those cohorts plays equal role in giving you that open rates, in giving you that that kind of a engagement on your emailers, and it also sends a signals that okay, this domain is doing.
So open rates and click rates, they added to your domain reputation.
Yes, so that kinds of adds up to the domain health. So it's a game of both cohortization plus the right content and right journey to be addressed to those consumers.
So your system consisted of collecting more emails, improving domain reputation, segmenting users based on engagement levers, more engaged medium engaged, less engaged, and then also sending the most engaged content, most important stories, on the
Relevant
email.
stories for
Most
each of
relevant
those
stories.
segments.
Lovely, lovely. I love that. Okay, so most CMOs, they chase scale first. You scaled system first, or you rebuilt system first. I would like you to talk slightly more about why did you from early on thought about, I need to build a system. Was there any early sign for email that you believe that, this is a great channel or this will give me returns? Why that foundational thinking came in?
No, so fundamentally, if you look at a email as a channel, it's more. Uh, if you look fundamentally, it's more formal in nature, right? It's not just like WhatsApp or SMS, right? Which is kind of a informal, right? So that, and we are talking about healthcare with the consumers, right? So that kind of a matches with a category to a channel, kind of a sort of a combination, right? Because it gives, like the way email has evolved, right? It gives a very great platform to do storytelling rather than a direct selling kind of a thing, right? Where you just on WhatsApps, on SMS, you cannot be very much creative in terms of presenting your brand story, presenting your customer stories out there. So that's where we believe that email as a channel has a lot of potential, and obviously it is quite cost effective as well, right? And the interesting part is it can be done at scale, right? So that's gave us a confidence to invest fundamentally towards emailers rather than just doing it as a hygiene channel in the media.
So, since you have spoken about growth levers, every story has a turning point, right? And your growth levers were working. When did the inflection point came in where you realized that no, this is no more an engagement channel, it is now moving towards a growth engine or a revenue system?
No, so interestingly, if you look at things when the 4 or 5 growth levers which we spoke about, right? So fundamentally, the collection of emails, the domain health, and the kind of content mapping to the relevant audiences, right? Once these all three got sorted, so we are fundamentally confident that now system is ready and system is in good shape, right? And it started delivering some sort of a revenue in terms of numbers. But the turning point or inflection point came when we see that most of our emails started landing into the primary inbox, right? So then it just doubled down quite quickly, because that's when we think that this cannot be just an engagement system, but it can be materialized into a revenue growth engine, right? And that's where we got that confidence that now let's scale from here, and we then amplified it with the kind of interactive journeys, with the kind of AMP emailers to stitch the entire journey from storytelling and
So,
engagement to the revenue.
this is interesting. Growth levers plus primary inboxing, and obviously, very few brands are able to achieve primary inboxing. I'm sure you have done a lot of good stuff, a lot of relevant things to make that happen. And then you move towards interactive emails. I would like to touch upon interactive emails a lot more. What did you do on AMP?
So a lot of experimentation goes into that, right? Primarily, you have to play with a lot of content pegs relevant to the target audiences. And then you try to gamify the systems, leveraging some of the gamification ideas like quizzes or like spin the wheel. Those kind of stuff has been experimented, giving them rewards against those, right? Kind of helps us keep the users engaged and keep them coming back to interact with the domain, interact with our emailers. So that's the kind of
No, I have to
changes.
tell you this. I am part of Truemeds subscriber list and I've received those emails in my primary and they're amazing. The spin the wheel, the interactive emails, even the quizzes, they're quite intellectual. And I think there's apart from this gamification, there's huge value. And I think I just love how simplified your emails are and how value driven they are. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, and glad to know that. We always keep looking for feedbacks to improve, but coming it from the the engine who is running the entire email marketing, it adds a lot of value to the system.
Sure. So, without delay, I want to see that because email has moved from being a engagement channel to a revenue system, if you are able to share those numbers, like what does that revenue systems look like? What, like your open CTRs or even your click-through open rates and even your return on ad spend on email, what does those numbers look like?
So if I talk about pre-post scenario, right, considering whatever revenue we're getting at the earlier stage, our ROAS moved from 2x to kind of a 40x kind of a multiple from this channel, primarily backed by strong movement in CTOR, which is click to open rates, and then subsequently in the engagement rates. There also we have seen a significant jump from our previous numbers in a multiples of 2x, 3x, right? So that kind of added the momentum. And on top of that,
What was your revenue like?
so revenue, again, we were already doing some sort of a revenue as a baseline, and once this inflection point came, it kind of double every quarter kind of a thing. That's the kind of number, that's the kind of pace we have grown on emailers.
So I think from inflection point, email became more predictable.
Yeah,
as a
and
revenue
that's
engine.
where we got some confidence into the channel that, okay, this channel can be also leveraged from the growth standpoint.
Sure. Interesting. Sort of everywhere, wherever I talk about your 40x growth story or your revenue system to brands or to D2C or to e-commerce, there's a disbelieved nod, or they say, okay, there would be some hack or temporary hack. People don't really believe that it's a revenue system. I want to re-emphasize, if you could summarize what your growth story depended on. How did you even achieve, this? How did you even created this whole framework?
No, absolutely right. Because even before cracking this channel, we also had very fundamental thoughts, right? Ki whether this channel will explode or not, but we took a very honest effort towards it, right? And if you look at summarizing this, the 4-5 key pillars which I can talk about is obviously interesting brand stories or customer stories which you can engage with the consumers is the first piece. Solving for the reachability or inboxing rate, landing on primary inboxing is the second part. Relevant content pegs to improve your click to open rates because that keeps on improving your domain health, and obviously then amplifying it with the right set of interactive communications like AMP emailers in terms of quiz, in terms of gamifications to stitch the end story, right? So that's what which I can talk about is helping us. And obviously the most important piece is consistent experimentation, trying and failing and reiterating, and that's where the team plays a very important role, right? Both the team at Truemeds and obviously the partner support from Netcore, right? Because these sounds bit easy when you have done it, but a lot of technicalities goes into it, and without an expertise coming from the partner like Netcore, it becomes very difficult to navigate this journey, right? So thanks to the entire team at Truemeds for consistently experimenting with every aspect of the emailers, and again to Netcore team to support us in this journey all this while, right? So I would say it's a lot of consistency, a lot of hard work, a lot of experimentation has gone there to reach at this stage.
Amazing. Thank you, Sourav, so much for. I think you all have done extraordinary work as a team. I think the Truemeds team has this first principle thinking, which obviously comes from the top. And I think kudos to your sustainable mindset that you were able to believe and navigate the channel so deeply. My last question: if you had to give one piece of advice to D2C marketing leaders out there or to e-commerce marketing leaders out there, what that would be from your overall experience in the last 2.5 years building this whole revenue system?
I think there are a couple of or more than 2-3 insights which I can talk about basis my experience and learning is that always like brand building is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? So you have to give and think fundamentally and give enough time to every possible aspect, every possible channel, and think fundamentally grounds up, right? Not just trying it as a hygiene. So that is one piece of advice which I can give. Second is think sustainably, right? Because as a startup in the current ecosystem, you want to build profitable businesses, right? And you can't keep throwing monies in acquiring new customers, but focus more on retaining the existing customers with the help of these CRM-led channels, which are much more cost-effective and gives you enough levers to experiment and with the communications and all, right? And the third piece is you have to treat these channels as owned and operated channels because you are working on first-party data. So you have to be very cautious about bombarding consumers like with a high frequency emailers, etc., in terms of relevancy. So that's where don't treat it as a rented channel where you are just leveraging on somebody else's audience to build the business, right? So these are the 2-3
No,
learnings which I have
that is
in
amazing
this journey.
advice. No, Saurav, thank you so much. The last advice I just want to add up that a lot of brands treat email IDs as data, and I'm so happy that you all treat them like serious people, real people, and you have been very, very cautious about telling stories and sharing them, being relevant to those users. A lot of time people treat their own email channel which they've built as a rented channel, and then they keep sending whatever they would like even if it is not relevant. But the way you all have treated emails more seriously, emails with a lot more context and relevance and experimentation, I think that is building or helping you build the whole revenue system. I've seen this in North America and Europe. Brands, they start building revenue systems from day one, specifically when we look at email, and email contributes nearly up to 25 to 30% of their overall revenue at
Interesting.
brands. So I think it's high time that Indian brands also take a note of this and also keep investing in building it as a revenue or growth system from day one. And I think they'll experience what you have been experiencing. And I wish you all the best that you keep doubling down quarter on quarter. With this, we are really looking forward to hear more stories from you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here, and more than happy to. I'm glad that I've been able to share some of the stories and some of the work which we are doing at Truemeds. So, yeah, looking forward to more stories ahead.
Thank you, Sourav. Thank you so much.
Thank you.